Right, so why don't we get started and we'll see as people join in. I think I know all of you, but I am Jessie Mahoney for those of you who don't know me. And this is going to be a relatively informal discussion, though I think I'll talk probably more than I usually do and do a little less coaching, but we'll see how it goes. I always like to start with a bit of mindfulness just to have folks take a moment to breathe and settle in. So if wherever you are, you can find a comfortable seat and ground your sit bones into whatever you're sitting on. And if you can, bring both feet to the floor. If you're in bed on the East Coast, you don't have to do that. I give you permission to just luxuriate wherever you are. But if you can, grow your spine long and tall out of your sit bones up towards the sky and reach the crown of your head towards the sky. And close your eyes for a moment. And just focus on your breath. Just for a few minutes, finding a place to land. And find a little spaciousness in your chest. You can rest your hands lightly on your thighs, whatever's comfortable for you. And lengthen your inhale and lengthen your exhale. Just notice how that feels, breathing in and breathing out. Notice your chest rise and fall with each inhale and each exhale. And notice perhaps any tingling in your fingers and your toes. And just an easefulness that maybe is spreading throughout your chest for those of you that had a busy long day doing something else. Can you come back into your body here and into this space and into this moment and just be present here with whatever is, whatever you're bringing to this moment in time in this situation, perhaps just a curiosity. And as you sit there, I was going to share some thoughts. These are two blog posts that I wrote recently on this topic. And so just to reflect on them as we get started. Where is the grass greener? Not necessarily on the other side, or with a different partner, or with one who behaves differently, loves differently, parents differently, or has different expectations. The grass is greener where you water it. What does watering the grass look like? Being mindful, pausing and being present, noticing and being aware, choosing with intention how you want to show up and proceed, allowing imperfection and humanity, showing grace and compassion for yourself and for others, looking for what works, seeing where you have a connection and how your partner does show love, even if you think it looks different than it should. From here, it is easier to see a path forward. Watering the grass and looking on the bright side and appreciating what you have also does not mean that you don't make changes or shouldn't choose something different. A new relationship, moving, growing, changing, can be what you want and can be what serves you best. Creating something new can be amazing. When you've watered your grass, accepted the situation as it is, and see the beauty in the mess, sometimes you decide you want something different for yourself or for your life. Sometimes, excuse me, something different serves you or the world better. Sometimes making a change is what love and compassion would do. A new path is not necessarily an easier path or a happier path. It is just a different path, a different mess to find beauty in. Making a change is not necessarily a failure of managing your mind, or a failure of a relationship, or a failure to make something work. It's not necessarily escaping or running away or rejecting something. It's a choice. just like not making a change is also a choice. Coaching and mindfulness don't tell you to just be happy and see rainbows everywhere. They help you choose your choice with conscious intention, and then to choose your experience of whatever choice you make. So lengthen your inhale and let out a huge exhale. And slowly open your eyes and let the light back in. And we will get started. So this idea of when to change your thoughts, and I just said versus when to make a change. And I think they're not actually either or, because you have to do the work on your thoughts before you make a change. And so the question is really when to make a change. But I wanted to focus a bit on, I think people really jump to what do I need to fix? What do I need to change? And many of us just want to change things to feel better. And so what I like to focus on in coaching is really how you want to feel in the future. And as those of you, I see a lot of you who coach with me. So the idea of finding calm and contentment and clarity and peace, and if that is what you want to feel, sometimes that's changing your thoughts. Sometimes that is making a change. So you have to start with, I like to say, the mindfulness piece. And that's why I started with that. You have to be mindful of what is and what's happening, and noticing and being aware of not just what is in terms of maybe what your job is or what your relationship is or what the circumstance is, but what you're thinking about it and what you're feeling about it. So for those of you who have been involved in coaching, and I think most of you have, that would be a version of the model, depending on what coaching philosophy you come from. And so taking the time to stop and look at all of the parts of your life and be patient and breathe. And even Brooke Castillo talks about not jumping too fast to fix something. So you don't have to fix your thoughts or your circumstances to start. You actually just have to be mindful and see them. And when you jump to fix them or jump to make a decision, you don't necessarily end up where you want to end up. So although I talked about changing your thoughts, she talks about in a podcast that I 100% think you should all listen to if you're interested in this topic. It's called Changing Your Life or Changing Your Feelings. And so she talks about the feelings. And I like to coach, as I always say, from the feeling line, because the feeling is what drives our actions and what drives our experience of life and our results. And so noticing how you feel and what are the thoughts that are leading you to feel that way. And also realizing we usually want to change something because it will make us feel better. And so if you're wanting to change it to feel better, you really need to look at why you want to change it, because our goal, as most of us want to feel better, and the goal of life is not actually to always feel better, but to have a full spectrum experience, to feel better and worse and grow. And if you don't change your thoughts and your feelings before you make a change, you're just going to bring your same head and your same thoughts and your same feelings to the next situation, and the change won't solve the problem. So that's where taking the time and really connecting into what you feel and feeling it is the answer to making a good decision about whether to change it. So the other parts that I like to dig into when thinking about this issue is clarifying your priorities and really writing down like 1 to 4 or 5, what are your priorities? And you can use those to help you filter your decisions and whether to make a change. And I also really think it's important to look at them and make sure that you have a life that's in alignment with it. And sometimes it's your thinking, but often when you look at priorities, it really clarifies what you want and why. And if the why is just to change how you feel in terms of changing what you want, that's not necessarily going to be helpful. But if the why is that you really want something different in your life, perhaps you want to spend more time with your children, or you want to learn something new, or you want to live in a different place for a certain reason, then that is very different than just wanting to feel better and thinking that if you move to San Diego, you will feel better. If you have some other very specific reason, and that will actually change other things, that can be really helpful. So I find it really helpful to sort of thought download about what you want and why. And I always make it clear with people I work with, it's also what you actually want as opposed to what you think you should want, because a lot of what we think we want is actually what we think we should want, and we don't actually want it. Or we want it because of how we think it will make us feel, but not necessarily what we want. And what do you want to create, or who do you want to become? Because I often get stuck in these models of like, oh, if we just change our thinking, that doesn't necessarily allow you to grow, and you want to grow. And so sometimes changing your thoughts is the growth, and sometimes changing the circumstances is the growth, or both can be growth. And so there isn't a right or a wrong answer. And then asking your future self what they would advise you usually gives you a really simple answer really quickly. And then another strategy is maybe like, what is your life manifesto? What is it that you really want with your life? We often, and that's also asking your future self, but it's really almost asking your dying self what they would recommend. And so that may be much farther ahead, but what is it you think the point of being here is? Because we often think, oh, I want to accomplish this, or I want to do this. But when you look back at your life, what is it you want to do with your life? Is it enjoying things, being more present? Is it taking risks or growing or doing interesting things? We all have different things that come to the top of that list, and we should honor that, because there isn't a right or a wrong answer. And then digging into the thoughts, you always have to do first. So you can't just make the change. Like, it's not like either or. You have to dig into the thoughts and really look at them, knowing, as I talked about, that you'll take those thoughts and feelings with you wherever you go. So if you don't process them and figure out where they're coming from, for example, if you're a victim in this situation, you'll be a victim in the next situation. And many of us in the medical world have this kind of victim mentality. And so noticing where in all the parts of your life you see yourself as a victim, because you'll take that to your next relationship or your next job or your next city or whatever it might be. And so it's doing that work to see that you are not a victim, and doing that work, for those of you familiar with the term, like to get into emotional adulthood, which means that you own your part, even in what might be like an abusive relationship or a toxic work situation, which is one that you very well might decide to leave. And coaching doesn't say like, coach yourself to think that's okay. It helps you make a decision from a clean space. And so even owning your part in those relationships, how you got there, how you might be contributing, when you get to that spot, that's where you can then make a more clean decision. And then if you're thinking about making a change, you have to tap into the thoughts about, well, if I make this decision, I think I will feel this way. And it's like, well, why will I feel that way? What thoughts will I be thinking? And can you bring those thoughts here and now? And sometimes they don't work, and sometimes they're not believable, but maybe you can find something that's close to it. We often say in relationships that you want to find the love in the relationship you have. So you're coming at even making a change from a place of love. And so can you be, and sometimes you can't get back to that, but can you be okay in either situation, whether you stay or you go? Can you be content in either situation? So particularly like with a job, it's like, I could be okay here, but I want something different. And so thinking about also how you want to feel, and think those thoughts now and practice them so that you can start to feel that way and start to make decisions from that space, rather than if I change, I'll feel better. And then if you're going to come up with replacement thoughts, they have to be truly believable. So you can't just force yourself to think good thoughts. And that's where, say, in a abusive situation or a toxic work situation, and maybe it's not even that bad, but something you just want to change. Like, you sometimes don't want to change your thoughts. You don't want to say like, oh, that's okay with me. It doesn't bother me. Because your authentic self about what you want for your life, like if you consulted your future self, they would be like, nope, you should go. And So this idea of when you're ready to make a change comes back to my always favorite question, which is, what would love do? And so if love would change your thoughts to stay because you can be okay staying and that feels like the right answer, then that can be your answer. But that includes love for you, love for whoever the other person might be, love for, and it feels a little bit when you think about like a job, but love for the whole situation. And if your answer is that that would leave and would go do something else, love for sort of life and humanity in the world, then you probably shouldn't just be adapting your thoughts to like where you are. And so if you take your time, and so when you are ready to leave, or you are trying to decide, and I like to, leave is like a word that comes up a lot, but it's also ready to make a change when you're going to, what I mean by that is change a circumstance. So if love would change the circumstance and you are not trying to change how you feel, you can love here, love there, but overall love would want a different circumstance, then that's probably where you want to go. You also, if you are choosing to make a change, you want to not be in a rush. There's no hurry. You have to feel all these feelings along the way, and you have to process them all and get out of victimhood, as I mentioned, and get out of emotional childhood. So own your role in it. And even be okay with where you are. And if you're not in a rush, so you're like, yes, I really want to leave this and I'm not in a rush and I've thought about it for 6 months and I still really feel that way and I'm not jumping to it because I'll feel better in some other situation, that is a good place to come from. And then if you, if you like your reasons, honestly like your reasons. And so your reasons generally that you like would be you genuinely want something different for your life. And so that's where I would go back to what I mentioned, the priority list. And so say your current circumstance is not compatible or incongruent with your priority list. So you can't spend time with your children, or you have to live in a city you don't want to live in, or you're doing, I don't know, surgery all day and you want to be a clinic doctor or whatever it might be. If it's incompatible with what you truly want for your life, you shouldn't change your thoughts to stay there, because that doesn't serve you and it's not growing. The other thing is that sometimes we feel like it's a failure to move on. And it doesn't have to be. Like your relationship with that person, your relationship with a job, that can all be complete, done, enough, and you might be ready for something new. So again, it's you genuinely want something new, and that you want to grow in a certain way, realizing that staying can also be growing. And so it's just that you actually want a very specific path. You're at this fork in the road and going right is what feels good to you. Not because you're looking for right to solve a problem, but because right is fun, interesting, what you want for your life. There was actually a recent Life Coach School podcast that offended a lot of people, and actually including me, because Brooke Castillo basically said that she'd left her marriage just because she wanted to, but she said it in this way, like, just because I wanted to. And I think that's what got people to sort of think like, well, that feels kind of selfish, but it is this idea that you are a human and you only get one life to live. And so you should really connect to what you want to do and live and experience, and be thoughtful about it. That's my only thought. Or maybe don't say it that way. I don't know. And then the other thought is that if you're in a situation, you've done the thought work, you've done the feeling work, and it just takes so much self-coaching to be in that situation. So you're constantly coaching yourself at work to make it okay, or you're constantly coaching yourself in a relationship, and you're like, it can be okay if I do all this work, but that's not the life I want for the future. It's just too much effort. That would be a reason to say, well, okay, like you could make it okay, but you don't want to. And so it's getting back into the want. And then if it's actually toxic and you don't, it's not authentic for you to want to be in an abusive situation, then you shouldn't coach yourself to stay in it. For example, that one seems quite obvious, I think. So as long as you're not leaving to change how you feel, to escape, the other one is like to teach someone a lesson, or have your needs met. Like I'll meet my needs if I go somewhere else, or someone else will meet my needs and this person doesn't. Then leaving can be the right choice. There isn't also, I would point out, a right choice. Like we get to decide whether it's a right choice or not. And so when you make a decision, you just own it as that's the decision I made. Knowing that almost always when we make a decision, we decide it's not a good decision initially, and we flip back and forth. And that doesn't mean you've done something wrong. That's just what our brain does, is like a safety habit, that we're like, that's not a good idea because I'm going into unknown territory. And so realizing that there is just this, it's just an automatic thing in your brain, and it doesn't mean you've made a wrong decision, and that self-doubt is normal, but that you get to choose once you've made a decision to change something, to make it the right decision. And so spinning into those, what we call indulgent emotions, where you're like, well, I don't know if it's the right decision, and maybe I made a mistake, and all that, that doesn't serve you either. And so once you've decided, you move forward, and you're deciding from a place of intention. And then I think another good place to make a decision is like when you see that there's a cost to staying and a cost to going, and there's growth staying and growth going, and that there's good staying and good going, and bad staying and bad going, then you're making a decision from intention. So all of that process, which is a lot of things to process, and really they're just kind of things to think about. And the key point is that you need to process the thoughts and the feelings and feel them, and not be changing just to avoid something or to feel better, and that you've really worked through all of it. And then that there is no right decision, like whether to change your thoughts or change your circumstance. You just get to pick, but you're doing it from this place of mindfulness. That's the spaciousness to process everything and make a really grounded, authentic, calm decision, that you allow yourself time to process. So there's no hurry. There's no hurry to leave a job. There's no hurry to leave a relationship. And I know for many of you that have coached with me for a while, like you get to this point somewhere along the line, you're like, oh, now I'm ready. Like, I feel like I can see a different path. And you get there in time because you've done the work, and you've processed the feelings, and you've processed the thoughts, and you've figured out where you are and what you actually want. And you're not coming from a graspy place of like, I just need to fix this. I'm so overwhelmed, frustrated, angry, resentful. You're coming from a very grounded, calm space. And from that space, it's 100% okay to change something. And obviously, our lives are full of change, and you don't necessarily want to stay somewhere that's also not working for you. So I'm curious if people have thoughts on what I said. Oh, someone's just talking about their computer glitches. If people have thoughts or want to get coaching, I'm gonna turn off the stream, and so then there won't be other people listening. So hold on one second. And then if people want to have more privacy about whatever they bring up, that's an option. Does anyone have thoughts about what I said, or decisions that you're struggling with, trying to decide a change, or is your brain confused about when you might make a change versus when you might just want to change your thoughts?
Best volunteer. I have things to say.
Yeah, I know. She's ready.
I think that you are really on, and I've done this where it's like, think about what you want and for your life before saying yes, and it makes saying no a whole lot easier. And then that kind of like boundary creation frees you up to really just put yourself totally into what your goals are. The pain point I've had, oh, go ahead.
I just had this thought that like, it's also not coming from a place of scarcity. So when I hear the word boundaries and like saying no, it feels like a scarcity of time and a scarcity and like a tension, push pull. And yet when you said like, if it's what I want, that comes from a place of not scarcity. It comes from more of a place of abundance, of like what you want to grow or what you want to create. Do you see that? And so it may create different feelings that might lead
Yeah.
you decisions that get you to a feeling you want, as opposed to like, just protect me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like I've been in some committees and normally they would have said like, oh, we need someone to do this PowerPoint. I don't want to do it. Like not even one part of me wants to, but then I feel like I should, you know, because I'm part of this committee. So I should do it. But then I volunteer and then I begrudgingly do it. And I'm like, oh my God, this sucks so bad. But then there's like potentially someone who actually wants to do it and they should do it and I should not. I should do the thing that I want to do. So I think that's been helpful and is a new experience in a way to.
That's tapping into what you want.
Yeah.
Authentically want, not wanting other people to like you or wanting to make a good
Right.
but what you want for your life. And that's where I do think, it seems kind of silly to write out your priorities. And the other thing I wanted to say is always put yourself on the priority list. Many of us don't. It's like my children are number one, maybe my partner's number two, or my career. And like, we're like way down at the bottom, but put yourself somewhere near the top, because as you pointed out, like if you don't put yourself there and you're doing all the things for other people, then you're showing up with resentment and it doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, I think it was helpful to find like my mission statement and like my overarching like strengths and values, and then just like, well, if it doesn't align, then it's not mine, it's someone else's to do.
Yeah.
And so then I like tested it out and I held my tongue when they're like, oh, we need volunteers for these PowerPoints. And I was like, I'm gonna be quiet.
Yeah.
And you know me, I'm not quiet very long or very good. But I was like, I did the whole like, okay, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I was like, okay, I passed. Like I didn't volunteer. I don't even remember if anyone volunteered, but it did not become my responsibility. And I was like, I won. I won the ability not to have to do that. And
well, that's changing your action as opposed to changing your thoughts. Like it's actually saying, I don't want to do this. And that's looking at how your thoughts and feelings created your results and saying, I want different results.
Mm-hmm.
And like having a different result would be making a change sometimes, but it may sometimes just be changing your thinking about it. And Ingrid, you moved on the screen, but Ingrid had a question in the comment too about making choices when they affect other people. So husband, children, colleagues, and how to identify making major changes that have some level of risk and could be a big challenge for everyone. So it's the selfishness component. And any decision or change you make is going to affect other people. And so I think this comes from this idea that we want to fix and change and help other people. And we want to control how they feel. And the problem is that other people are affected by our changes. It's not a problem. It's just a fact. I shouldn't label it as a problem, but it's just a fact. Other people are affected by the decisions that we make. And yet, if you make a decision that helps you, so you're happier, that's what you can control, because you can't actually control how the decision is going to impact them or how they're going to think or feel. And so we often say, I see people saying, well, I'm going to stay here because stay in this job that I can't stand because it will make my children happier because they don't have to move. But we can't actually control whether they're going to be happy or not in either setting. And so looking at what you can control, but making a conscious decision, again, maybe you want to stay because you want that your children to be able to stay in their school, but just make sure you're not trying to control outcomes that are out of your control. So when you make the decision, tapping into what is in your control and what is not in your control, and we often are wanting to change how other people experience something, which is totally out of our control. There was one other thought I just had about that too. And if you make a change that helps you, of course, you show up in a different space and as a better mom, doctor, etc. And there's value in that. Many times we don't value ourselves enough. And we think it's selfish for us to take care of ourselves, knowing that any choice you make can be the right choice. And so tapping back into what would love do, and that's where you can actually put everyone into your process. And so love for you, love for the children, love for the parents, and I like to just use love for everything. So love for your colleagues as humans. And so if you stay in a situation or you make a decision that it very much negatively impacts you with the hope of making other people happy, which is totally out of your control, you 100% end up unhappy. And so that doesn't help anybody. And so I think it's truly grounding into your own, I like to use the word authenticness, or just be grounded in who you are and what you want. And doing that from a place of love, taking care of yourself, like you're the only one that can actually do that. No one else can do that for you. And if you do that from a place of love for other people, you're considering them. But we can't make, as doctors, we want to make everybody happy. We want everyone to like us, all of our patients to like us, all of our colleagues to like us, and we can't do that. And so sometimes you do have to make yourself happy first. And that actually often makes everyone else happy. And picking a decision that you think might make someone else happy, you can't control whether it does or doesn't, and it might not be the right decision. So why not focus on what you can do and you can control? Anybody else have anything? Just flipping through because I can't see a lot of you. That anyone want to get coached on anything, have other thoughts about what's come up, or they want to weigh in on struggles? All right, well, tell us more, Iljana, unless is anyone else, let's give them another.
Anyone else? Yeah, I don't want to like monopolize all your time always.
Anyone else struggling with decisions or? Okay, Jill, go ahead. We'll get you in the end, Iljana, I promise.
Hi. Thanks, Jessie. That was really helpful. It's funny, I feel like I've sort of heard a lot of these things in different ways before, but I really like the way you kind of put it all together. I find that since discovering life coaching, I found it really interesting to just like watch my thoughts, because I've been thinking about moving on. I've had my family practice for 13 years. I'm thinking about moving on to doing full-time psychotherapy, and I'm in life coach school training right now too, so to do that as well. But I'm noticing how I totally could love my family practice. And then I get more confused because I'm like, well, if I'm not going to leave it because I hate it, then why would I leave it? And then I start thinking, well, I only have so much time in the day.
Yeah. So first of all, listen to the one podcast I mentioned, Change Your Life, Change Your Feelings, or something like that. And there's another one about deciding when to leave. So she addresses that exact question. And that is actually the point at which it's, and I will tell you, I made a change a year ago. So I've been in your spot, and you do all the work to like what you do, and you can stay and you can do it. And that's actually the spot where you can make the most easeful, clear, intentional decision. And so then
I don't feel like I'm escaping anything. It's just like, maybe it's come to a completion.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I feel like I'm almost doing a little bit of like, I don't know if it's that sort of like that idea, that hidden emotion. I'm kind of indulging in a bit of confusion, thinking, oh, like, should I go? Should I stay? Because I think I'm sort of avoiding the like sadness of, just moving on. And I am going to miss it because I don't hate it anymore. Like a year and a half ago, I really hated my job and I thought I was stuck. So it's been very interesting to feel like, oh, actually, I'm not stuck. I could totally do whatever I want if I choose, but I can also change my thoughts to actually enjoy it more. But now maybe I just want to do something just because, my life is taking a different direction.
So you're really at the end of what I described. Do you see? You did the mindfulness, you were where you were, you saw all the thoughts, how they were making you feel. You actually changed them. You are not a victim. You actually, right? You're owning your experience. You're like, oh, I could do this, or I could do that.
Yeah.
And then you get to choose. And it is actually confusing because then it's, well, why would I leave something that I like?
Yeah. I worked so hard to like this. Like, why just leave?
Yeah.
I think the other thing that comes up for me is that I'm doing a lot of coaching for female physicians with burnout. And it feels somehow inauthentic to me to be like, oh yeah, like just learn to love your job, but I'm leaving mine. I feel like that's the thought that comes up to me lately. Like, how am I being a good role model?
Well, but is staying, if you want to do something else, being a good role model?
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Because some people, and I'm guessing this, you coach people who, and I coach people who go through their coaching and they love their job and they stay. They're like, no, I actually really want to keep doing this. And maybe your job was a great job for 13 years. My job was a great job for 15, 16 years. But at year 17, I was ready to do something different. And it might not be that you're never, you're just not going to do that. And maybe psychotherapy isn't actually going to be any easier. It's just going to be different, right?
No, it's interesting. I definitely see like the idea, like you take your brain with you everywhere. Like I've been doing a lot of, like I said, just like watching my mind between, so I'm doing both part-time right now.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Like I have a lot of thoughts that I could transfer over to my family practice. The other day I had a psychotherapy patient. I thought, wow, like I know exactly how to help her. But that thought feels so good. I thought I could totally think that with every single patient in family medicine, if I chose. But I also noticed myself thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And, I'm disorganized. And like, I think those same thoughts in family medicine too.
But the other thing is your brain's telling you one's better than the other. Your brain is telling you also that it's not a good message to switch if you're doing X. Do you see that? So it's almost like staying in family practice. If you could like it enough to stay, that would be better.
Right. That's somehow more honorable or something.
Is it?
Totally. I don't know. I don't think so. And I think you're right. It could even be seen, like you said, as a great example for my coaching clients to say, well, like, you know what, I could love what I do and I could pick something that, is in alignment with who I am in a different chapter in my life.
And I'm going to tell you, having done it, it's actually a harder path, right? Because staying there and doing what you know and being like, oh, I'm good at this and I can like it. And, you have,
it's familiar.
It's familiar. That's potentially the easier path.
You know what? I've been totally thinking that as well. Because even talking to my husband about the idea of making a change, it would be less money and I'd be starting fresh in a lot of ways. Like we wouldn't be moving, but a lot of things would be a big change. So yeah, it's still 50-50, right? It would just be a different topics in the 50-50.
Right. It would be the uncertainty and the unknown, and there'll be lots of negatives there, I'm sure. But that's where you really need to tap into, are you making the change because you think you'll feel differently or better doing psychotherapy and coaching? Or does your brain just has it been doing this for, I don't know, 13, 15, however many years of training, and it wants to, I do go back to that Mary Oliver quote, right? We all get one wild and precious life. And so we shouldn't sit here thinking that one is better than the other. I was actually coaching someone the other day who, and I know this comes up for so many people, like we have in our minds as physicians also that there's like a better, harder path. And if you if you do the harder cases, that's better. Or if you stay in the take more call, that's better. And so if you give up, it wasn't this person actually, but if you give up parts of OB, that's somehow less than, or this.
My brain totally does that. Yeah.
And it's just your brain telling you that. Like actually people outside medicine don't even know what you're talking about. And the next generation would actually say, like, why not pick the easier thing that makes you happy? Like, why is picking the harder thing better or the harder path better? And I think many, many, many of us in medicine think that the harder path is better.
I feel like, don't you think that maybe this is me using coaching against myself, but I feel like the life coach school concepts sort of glamorize picking the harder path too. Maybe that's my thought. This idea of embracing discomfort and I don't know.
Well, there's a philosophy there, which I personally think doesn't work for doctors. So we doctors, and I don't know, there may be some non-doctors on the call, but many professionals are really exceptional at pushing themselves. And so that model of like doing the uncomfortable thing is important for people who don't do all the hard things, but we already do all the hard things. We are not afraid of discomfort. We've gone to medical school, we've done we do so many uncomfortable things. In fact, we do uncomfortable things to our own detriment and we're not even seeing it. And so for asking us to do uncomfortable things doesn't really make sense, or like to push ourselves to grow. Most of us actually need to go into the discomfort. And that's for me where the mindfulness comes of not doing something.
Yes, I was just going to say the same thing, that just the discomfort of non-doing.
Yeah.
Or rest, that's our hard.
Yeah.
is to let yourself, take a half day off instead
Yeah.
of signing up for an extra clinic or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, or making a decision that and I don't advocate like people leaving. I think for everybody it's different, and people leave and come back or leave and shift to this product, but making a decision that works for you. I was thinking of Ingrid's comment, right? We immediately, and that's really funny because this was my judgment of Brooke's comment. So it's like we judge others just like we judge ourselves, which is it's selfish to make a decision on your own behalf that would just make you happy, right? It's like, because I want to. That was the triggering phrase that triggered many, many physicians who heard it. And so I think as we make a decision, like as I say that, it even triggers this sense of like, well, who does stuff because they want to? But if you think about like, you are worthy and your life is worthy, and doing things that make you happy and allow you to show up for all the people in your care, whether they're I know you have, your children or your family or your patients, or even that extends to the world. And that's where my favorite question, I just always go back to that apparently, which is what would love do, right? So love wouldn't stay in a job that when you want to be doing something different just because of what someone else might think. I'm not saying you should stay or not, but you need to tap into what you think, but it's what you really think, and make sure that your shift is not because your brain's telling you, because I do think our brains tell us that doing something different will feel better, even though we're really trying to do all the coaching not to. You have to decide it's going to be exactly equal in terms of good and bad.
Yeah, it's just like a different type of good and a different type of bad. Yeah.
And if you're making the decision from that place, that's an authentic decision.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense.
So it makes the decision harder.
Yeah, no, totally. And I also have noticed, I had a self-coaching scholars session on this, that every time I'm in my family practice, I'm like, okay, so like, oh, this is a good day. Okay, now I want to stay. Like, oh no, actually today I hate it. Okay, now I'm going to go. I'm like, no, I can't do that, because you can't leave just because you don't like it. So I'm doing there's a lot more chatter going on in my mind in that decision-making process, which I know just is more exhausting.
Well, so, and in terms of that, like just decide when you're going to decide. And I think for you, and I think this was true for me too, you just have to like, it's not that there's a right decision. Whichever one you pick, you're going to make the right decision. And you can decide to stay for another year and then change. Like that's the one thing I'm hearing that I mentioned is the rush. Like, what if there's no rush to make this decision?
Yeah,
So,
no, that's true. And not to mull it over for the whole time, but just to like put it on the shelf intentionally, maybe.
Yeah, well, so decide in 3 months. If it's, I don't know, quarterly, April 1st, July 1st, am I ready? What do I want to do? But if you're constantly deciding, which is what it sounds like, that's exhausting.
And then sort of seeing both roles like through that lens of, okay, like, will today prove that this is the right choice, or will it make me waffle?
Yeah. And so don't allow that, because I'm sorry to call you out on that, but that's indulging in indecision.
Yes. Yes. And I know I'm definitely doing that. I see that for sure. Yeah.
But that also tells you that neither decision is better than the other.
Yeah. Right. Because one day I'm like, oh, family medicine, this is great. Okay, I'm just going to stay. Why would I leave? And then I'm like, oh no, I love CBT. This is the type of psychotherapy I'm doing.
Or can you do both?
I just want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It depends on how many hours I want to work.
Yeah. Well, then you get, but look at all the choices. Just see it as a plethora of choices.
Yeah, there's lots of options. Like I could get a long-term locum in my family practice so I can do less, and I can build up the psychotherapy hours over time. Yeah.
So what if that actually is where I think you should go? It's like, what are all the options? What if
not
it's
just
not
two?
an either or? What are like, write down 30 options. Not to like confuse yourself, but it might be clear then, like, no, I like this one, or like, so there's no scarcity of choice.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
What your brain will decide, but all right, I'm gonna let's see. I was gonna Joni, do you want to I don't see you on my screen, but if you want to unmute and talk, then you'll show up.